What's up, Tsla family? It's Ray J back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with SPY, Tesla, and the overall market. I'm going to break down some big things that Elon Musk just said, what's happening with the US and China, and other relationships that are affecting the overall stock market, and why Tesla saw a sell off today as there's still some more downside potential. Just know that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I'm saying as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out my Moomoo link. If you sign up for Moomoo, deposits $100, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks. If you deposit $2,000, you're guaranteed 25 in total, and deposit $5,000, you're guaranteed 60 free stocks. The offer ends on June 3rd. You'll also qualify for an 8.1% APY in uninvested cash, so check it out before they run out. Anyways, as far as the market's going, as you could tell, Tesla's getting these rejections that kept on happening, and we formed a triple bearish divergence, which led to some fears amongst the way in which this was going to move. So instead of continuing to break out and hold above 350 to remain bullish, I did say that Tesla has to hold 350 to keep this bullish stance. If we couldn't do that, I was expecting some kind of rejection near 333, which is where Tesla fell to. And if anything, there is more potential to dip more because of the overall market and because of many different factors. So remember, guys, Tesla news affects Tesla, but that's not the only thing that affects Tesla. Sometimes you have these algorithms that dictate the way Tesla, Nvda, and all these big tech stocks move, and they move together. There's a lot of unison in the markets. That's why today the whole market is bloody red together because of big news. Now, there was one exception in big tech, that was Google, because it had its own news. There was something big that happened to Google as they're launching their own AI search engine. But besides that, the majority of stocks are in the red and they fell together. So what I'm going to do is talk about some key levels a little bit later on. We need to see Tesla get back above at least 338 to get some kind of like bounce. And if we can't do that, we're favoring a dip to about 322 to 325 in that range, if not lower. And I'll talk more about the details of this chart in just a couple of minutes. I first want to talk about some Tesla news, then break down exactly why we're selling off like this for the whole market. I also want to note that for Tesla, there is this support right here at 320. We got to hold that. If not, we're going to be dumping to the low 300s, especially as we have this gap in the 298 area. So there's still that downside risk. But remember, Tesla's dipping. SPY is down pretty hard. It's down 1.6%, got a bearish looking daily candlestick. We also have this giant gap to fill. If we lose key support, we will be continuing to fall. The QQQ is down. The IWM is down. Apple's down. ES is down. Everything is bloody red except for like Google. What on earth is going on? Let's talk about what's happening to Tesla and the others. So I just want to say there was some good news that came out from Elon Musk, who talked about how he's going to be the CEO for the next 5 years, or at least he's planning to do that. He's going to be cutting time for Doge, and he's going to be spending more time with Tesla, and he's going to be spending more of his time and money with Tesla and less money when it comes to political campaigns. That's what Elon Musk just said. Musk also talked about how when it comes to self-driving, the tests are going to be geo-fenced to the safest parts of Austin to start things off. Now, why is this a big deal? Well, obviously, mainstream media loves to criticize Tesla for this, but I will not necessarily do that, because you have to consider that the robotaxi is a new business that Tesla is kind of like entering. They're new to this and they need to make things as safe as possible. So it's understandable for them to geofence the way in which they take routes. And by doing that, not only does it promote safety, but it helps them continue to practice and improve. When they start to launch their robotaxi, Musk mentioned they're just going to launch about 10 cars, so 10 robotaxis in Austin, Texas, sometime in June. And then they're going to slowly expand it, and eventually they may have over 1,000 over the next couple of months, according to Elon Musk. That's some big news and some good news for Tesla. That's the reason why we saw Tesla pop a bit yesterday. It was also green during the pre-market. It was actually up almost 2% at one point, but all the gains went away after the whole market dumped. So why is the market dumping? What's going on? One thing that's worth mentioning is that Mizuho is saying Tesla will outperform the market. It still could do that in June once we get the robotaxi launch in Austin, Texas. The price-price ratio is dipping, however, so Tesla's starting to lose a little bit of strength, which is completely normal. And then when you look at the charts, look at SPY next to Tesla, you guys can see they were pushing together. They came down together. They pushed together. Now they're curling down together right here, which goes to show how algorithms dictate Tesla. Thursdays tend to be a weekday for Tesla, only green 47.5% of the time. And we tend to see more volatility at noon and also at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So keep that in mind. Keep those metrics in your guys' minds. So why is the market selling off? Let's go over this. Keep in mind the whole market sold off, which is why Tesla got dragged down. The first factor is technical analysis. Okay, so this was a technical move. Why do I say that? Well, I predicted yesterday there's going to be a pullback coming to Tesla. There's going to be a pullback coming to the markets. If you guys watched my video from yesterday, we called this whole move. Why? There's a triple bearish divergence on Tesla. SPY and the QQQ had the same thing. So that's the first factor for why we started to dip. Technical analysis, right? The market was so overbought and we had lots of signals showing there was going to be a pivot, a dump coming eventually. And it finally came. So that's what ended up happening first. The second factor is the fact that we're seeing the 30-year bond going back up above 5%. So yields are going up like crazy. We're starting to see a big push in them. This is telling us that the borrowing rates for the US government and households is still relatively high, and this is still leading to concerns about what's happening with geopolitics. So that's part of the reason why this is going up, alongside the fact that Jerome Powell has not signaled a cut yet. We have President Trump and many other figures calling Jerome Powell too late Powell, as they want to see him cut. He hasn't given us the signal yet because of the tariffs and inflationary risks. And it's somewhat understandable. I can see why he wants to do that. If you guys listen to what Target said and many other retailers, I'll talk about that in just a minute. But simultaneously, you could also make the argument that Jerome Powell is wrong because he's basically waiting for a disaster. He's waiting for things to start break. He's waiting for things to start breaking, before he ends up doing the cuts. And that's the big issue that you could argue. So there's different ways to look at this, but that's part of why we're seeing yields going up. Secondly, there's another factor. Okay, we have Huawei. I may be saying that wrong. I don't really speak Mandarin, but they have a very, very big piece of news that came out. Last week, the US warned that using their chips could be a violation of export controls. They're saying that the design and production of those chips relied on US processes and equipment. And then Washington basically said that they were just altering the industry to the risk. They're trying to let everyone know what the risks are of using Chinese computing processes. So that's the reason why that led to some controversy, because then Beijing accused Washington of undermining the deal that they reached. And then the Chinese Ministry of Commerce threatened to impose legal consequences on any organization or individual that implements or assists in the implementation of the US measures. So basically, China is now retaliating. They're angry. They're saying that we're not really forming a good deal. They're not happy with these regulations and etc. This is leading to a lot of volatility in the chips markets. And this is part of why the market is seeing lots of fear about how the tensions are rising between the US and China. President Trump was very busy today meeting up with the South African president, so we didn't really hear much from him. But he did say a couple of days ago that he's working on a deal with Iran for a nuclear deal. He's been saying that for quite a while, and he wants long-term peace. Now, despite him saying that, we have Iran's top diplomats saying that Tehran will never stop to enrich with itself with uranium, and that it's going to reinforce their republic's hard line ahead of the new round of indirect talks of the US. However, they are going to continue to talk at least on Friday, so keep that in mind. That's a big piece of news because with these statements, Israel, and keep in mind there's a very, very long history between Iran and Israel. I'm not here to give you guys the whole history lesson. There's a lot of tensions between them due to religion and factors like that, the regions and such. And with that going on, with all these tensions and everything else that's going on, obviously this led to a lot of different factors. There's so much history, so I'm not saying this country's the aggressor or this one is. I'm just trying to say it led to this event. Israel is now making preparations to possibly strike Iran's nuclear facilities. So that's some big news. They're saying that if negotiations between the US and Iran collapse, they may be doing this according to sources. This is making world news right now. This is also contributing to the downside we're seeing. So, in a nutshell, tensions between Israel and Iran, tensions between the US and Iran and China, and all this fear about all these like tariffs and such as part of why the market's dipping, alongside yields being elevated, and then also technical analysis. That's why the market is seeing this technical move to the downside, despite the fact that Tesla didn't really get too much bad news. So now what's going on? Let's talk about a couple more things. Tomorrow is going to be Thursday, May 22nd. We have some important manufacturing numbers. We have the Global Composite Manufacturing and Services PMI reports at 9:45 a.m. Then we have some more manufacturing data at 11 o'clock a.m., and that's pretty much it for tomorrow. Look for volatility then. Right now, greed is making up the majority of sentiment, but we're going to get very, very close to neutral soon. Momentum is currently at extreme fear. This is also slowing down right now. And then we also have the put to call option ratio dipping as more puts are being bought. To add on to this, I just want to say that Target has announced their earnings. Unfortunately for Target, okay, they had very bad earnings. They missed on EPS at $1.30 when it should be $1.60. Revenue and net sales are down 2.8%, missing expectations. Their guidance is down. They now cut their guidance. Not good news for them. And finally, they are saying that just like Walmart, just like the Home Depot, well, actually not the Home Depot, just like Walmart, they're going to be increasing their prices. Not the best of news for Target. So Walmart and Target are going to likely increase their prices very soon. Not the best of news, and that could cause higher inflation as we're starting to see higher prices amongst retailers. So be very careful. They're saying that tariffs are going to be affecting them, so be prepared for that just to be safe. So with that being said, what do I see at least for the markets from this point on? What's going to happen to Tesla and the others? I understand all this news is just very noisy. It may give people headaches. I completely get that. I just want to give you guys some updates about what's going on around the world. But besides all of that, now we're just going to focus on technical analysis. So Tesla likes to reject off 350. We rejected here one, two, three times off the bearish divergence. Like I said before, if you want to see Tesla bounce, we have to get back above 338. But keep in mind that when you zoom out and you go to the daily chart, we look weak. We're looking weak on Tesla. Big rejection here. We're actually favoring more downside for the 320s, in my opinion. Looks pretty weak, in my opinion, looking at the bigger time frames. So we're going to go over the hypotheticals, then my prediction. If we hypothetically get a massive piece of news, let's just say Elon Musk announces something, we want to get back above 338 to 340. If we reclaim that, yes, we could be looking for some kind of balance move back up. Okay, so you want to get back above at least 338 to 340. However, if we're bearish, okay, if we're bearish, we're looking for basically us to continue lower. If we fell at 330, we're looking for a dump back down to about 325 to 322. So please be very, very careful as we got this big rejection right over here. As we get this rejection, we're looking to see if 330 holds or else we're dumping to 325 to 322. There's going to be a risk of more downside as we got this rejection, so please be very, very careful as time goes on. And that's going to be key for what ends up happening to Tesla moving forward. In my opinion, however, my prediction is that, like I said before, we might consolidate around 333 for some time, but then I do think Tesla will continue to dip for 325. There's a very, very good chance we start dipping all the way down to that low. I do anticipate more downside for the time being. Also, I just want to add that Tesla has this giant gap to fill down to about 300. If we lose the 322 area, our 50 EMA, I do think we might be dipping to 300. So please be prepared just to be safe. For SPY, we're looking relatively weak. We have a head and shoulders like pattern. We got this big bearish engulfing candlestick on the 4 hour, and we're looking very, very weak. Now, in my opinion, if you want to be a bull, you want to see SPY get back above 588. And if you want to be a bear, you want to see us fail at 580 to start dumping all the way down to like 575. My prediction, however, is that we're going to continue to fall. So we might be looking for, a small little move down to this 580 area. I think we might be touching that. Then we'll see if we get some kind of rebound to 585 to consolidate for some time. But once 580 fails, we should be continuing to dip towards 578. That's going to be this gap support at 578 to 575. I do anticipate we're going to be testing that range. And if 575 fills us, I do expect us to dump to 566 to fill the gap. So what do I think is going to happen? 580 is going to be tested. Then we're going to consolidate. Then we could be dipping all the way down to 580, if not 578 or below. On the QQQ, we got this big rejection right over here. We hit resistance and rejected many times. This also resembles a left shoulder, a head, and then a right shoulder, kind of. Actually, I think we broke this high right here. So maybe it's not a right shoulder. It's more of just like a triple bearish divergence, but it's a big rejection nonetheless. If you're a bull, if you want the bulls to win, you want to see us get back above like 517 to reclaim the 20 EMA to rebound. If you're a bear, you want to see us basically dump and fail at this 513 area to start dipping for 508 to 507, which is where the 50 EMA is going to be. What is my prediction? Well, I think the bearish case is looking more probable because I say it's more probable because we have the daily chart looking relatively weak off this rejection. There's a higher chance this ends up panning out after we got this big rejection right here. And we have a gap to fill down here at 508. Plus, if we end up losing 502 to 505, we have another gap to fall all the way down to 490. So it's looking pretty weak. My prediction is very simple, okay? I think what's going to happen is we see another like consolidation move in the morning, and then we're going to continue to fall to 508, and we'll see if we could bounce off 508 or not. If we don't hold that, we're going to be dumping even more, but I think we're going to be testing 508 very soon on the QQQ, which is this level right over here that I'm watching for resistance becoming support at 508. On the IWM, we got a rejection. We're making lower highs right here. I want to see this get back above at least 204 to rebound. If we can't do that, we're going to be at risk of dipping to about this gap fill to 201. 201 is going to be where we end up dipping to, so please keep that in mind. For ES, we're rejecting. We have a bearish divergence. I want to see us get back above at least 58.80 to rebound. If 58.80 is reclaimed, we could try a bounce, but we still favor downside as we could be coming down to this low right here at 5,800, if not below that. So to be bullish, you want to get back above 58.80 to 5,900. To be bearish, you want to continue to fall. I think it's going to be a mix of two where we pushed about the 58.80 or so area, and then we might start dipping all the way down towards the low 5,800s. That's going to be likely where we end up dipping, at least for now, on ES. So keep that in mind. On NQ, we have a rejection. We got a rejection of 21,600, and we have the support at 21,100. So keep that in mind. So if we hold support here, we could try a small rebound move, but then if we fail here, we could be dipping all the way down below 21,000 to dip to 20,800. If we're bullish, you want to get back above 21,300 to rebound. So this could be once again continue to fall. On NQ, if you look at the daily time frame, we're also continuing to fall. If you look at this MACD, we're looking weak here. This might rebound a bit to 21,200 before we start dipping to 21,000 flat. I also want to add that we have a gap over here around this 20,100 area. So we're looking bearish on NQ in my opinion. There's nothing bullish about this. We look like we're going to be dipping a little bit more. Now, it's possible we do see a little bit of consolidation first. It's possible we do that before we continue to fall back down towards 21,000 flat and 20,800 as our targets. So we might consolidate here before we start dipping to the lower levels. Bitcoin, however, is very resilient. It's actually pushing up, so it could be looking for a test of 110,000 or above. I still think it pushes a bit higher. However, despite the fact that it's pushing, there is a bearish divergence forming. So we'll have to see how it ends up holding at 110,000. I do think it might be pushing higher, but then we'll see if we reject. So look for a bit more upside to 110,000. Once again, for Tesla, we got a triple bearish divergence. We could be dipping to the 320s pretty easily, 325 to 322. I anticipate more downside, just to be very, very frank. For Nvda, we're rejecting as well off a bearish divergence. I need to see this get back above 134 to bounce. If not, we could be dipping back down towards 130, then 127. I do think we might be testing that on Nvidia. And if it doesn't hold 127, we're dumping to 125. So I do anticipate 130 before we start dipping to 127. Apple's dipping and making lower highs here. We have a gap to fill back down towards 198. So we'll see what happens if we can reclaim 204 or not. If we can't, we're going to be dipping to 200 then 198. For NQ, not NQ, Netflix, excuse me, Netflix might be dipping to 1182. We did talk about how it's going to be pushing to about 1200 before potentially pivoting. I did say it's going to be testing 1200. That's where we went to before we came back down. Now we're looking for 1157 as our main 1182 as the main support, then eventually 1157 if that fails. So I see 1182 coming next. On MSTR, we're looking kind of weak. It is trying to rebound here, so we're going to be looking for this 410 area, and we'll see if we come back down after that. But that's what I'm anticipating, at least so far as time goes on. For others out there, we have Celsius. We're making lower highs here. We're just, forming a double top and rejecting. We have to see if we can reclaim 37.36. If not, we could be dipping back down towards the 36 area. If that fails us, we're looking for 35 as our target. So we'll just have to see how things end up going from here. On Supermicro, we have kind of like a head and shoulders like structure. There's a bearish divergence here, and we could be dipping much lower. So we're going to be looking for 40 as our potential target. If that fails us, we're looking for basically the 37 area. We're also going to be watching to see what happens over here. So if we don't hold 40, we're looking for a dip back down to 37. For Palantir, we basically have this bearish divergence. We're going to see if we reclaim 122. If not, we could be dipping all the way down towards 118 to about 117. So I do think this might be dipping lower, so keep that in mind. For Rivian, we could be dipping towards 16 flat. If that doesn't hold, we could be dipping to about that 15.8 area. So I do anticipate a little bit more downside. We did talk about how it may reject off 17. SoFi remains bearish as it was for the last couple of days. Unless we hold above 12.83, I think it's favoring 12.5 to 12.3. For AMD, we're making lower highs. I expect us to test 110. If that doesn't hold, we're dipping to about 108. There's also a gap to fill at 102 if both of those levels fail, so I favor the downside. For ARM, we're making lower highs here. We could be dipping to about 126. PayPal is rejecting. We're making lower highs. We need to get back above 72. If not, we're looking for 70.5 as our target. Coinbase is kind of flat right here. It's consolidating. If we get back above 270, we could try to bounce. If we don't hold 257, we're looking for a dip. So I do think we kind of pop and dip to about 257. If it doesn't hold, we're looking for a dip back down towards the lower 250s. For Amazon, we're making lower highs right here. We have to see if 200 holds. If not, we could be dipping back down to 198 to 193. So we'll have to see what happens as we come down to that range. So watch and see what happens at 200. If it doesn't hold, we're looking for a dip to 198 or below. For Meta, we also have kind of like an inverse cup and handle. We need to get back above 640. If we can't, we're looking for a dip to about 622 or below. For Google, we're looking a bit more bullish. We're making higher lows. However, just keep in mind that we just had one good piece of news that came out. We did pop initially, but then we did see a rejection after that, and there is a slight divergence simultaneously. So I wouldn't be surprised if we come back down to about 167 if 170 fails us. Microsoft may also be dipping back down to about 450, so keep those levels in mind. Just a few more. We have DJT, which might be dipping towards 24 flat. The VIX is looking bullish as we have an inverse head and shoulders right here. We have this like left shoulder, head, and then right shoulder forming an inverse head and shoulders to start pushing to fill this gap for 22. The VIX looks bullish as that's bearish for the markets. The 10-year is very elevated and the dollar is trying to bounce back up to about 100. So I do anticipate some upside in the dollar. So my view is that there's more downside potential for SPY in the markets. I do think SPY is going to test around 580, and we'll see if you get a small rebound before continuing to fall. I also think the QQQ is going to be testing 508 or below, and all of this downside is going to be affecting Tesla off this bearish divergence rejection, taking Tesla down to 330, which if it fails, we're looking for 322 to 325 as our next targets as we anticipate more downside. All right. Thank you for listening, guys. Enjoy the rest of your day. I'll be back tomorrow before market open for another update. Until then, have a good one and peace out.